Section 5 of Orpheus with his Lute by W.M.L. Hutchinson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Deucalion's Flood. Once more the moon shone full over the forest, and Orpheus sat at the feet of the nine. "Why do you look at me so eagerly?" Melpomene said to him. "It is one of my sisters you must ask for the next tale." "Of your grace, lady," said he, "tell me first the end of your own story. What did Pandora do when she found hope was left in the casket?" "She pitied the fairy thing," answered Melpomene, "because it seemed half dead, and she laid it in her bosom to warm it back to life. But when she had cherished it a while, hope crept into her heart, and made its abode there. And being comforted, it inhabits ever since the hearts of mortals. Sometimes they know that it is whispering falsehoods to them, but they cannot help listening, so sweetly it speaks, and it abides with them, whether they will or no." "But is not hope a blessed thing?" asked the child. "I am sure I have heard my father say so. If Zeus so hated mortals, why did he not send them only evil sprites in Pandora's box?" "It was not Zeus," said Melpomene, "who placed hope in the casket, nor did he know it was already there when he put in the evil sprites. That marvelous box belonged first to Prometheus, and Zeus asked it of him as a gift while they were yet friends. So Prometheus, foreseeing what Zeus would do with it in the end, hid hope under the inner rim of the box before he parted with it, for he knew nothing else would enable mortals to bear all the miseries that were coming upon them." "Ah, lady," cried Orpheus sadly, "I cannot rest for thinking of Prometheus. Must he indeed suffer forever? Can it be that cruel Zeus will never repent?" For all reply, Melpomene laid her finger on her lip, and there was silence a while among the sisters. Then gently spoke Calliope. "Remember, my Orpheus, what I said to you erewhile touching the immortals. Only the foolish among men ever reproach the gods. The wise know that they move by dark and tangled ways to one sure goal of righteousness. Remember also that Prometheus was not wholly guiltless, for he disobeyed one to whom he had sworn allegiance. Nor was Zeus without right on his side, for if a king suffers his law to be set at naught, his kingdom is brought to confusion." "I will remember," said Orpheus humbly, "and I will not call Zeus or any of the immortals cruel or unjust. But oh, if I had been one of those men whom Prometheus helped in their great need, I think I must have gone to the world's end to find him and tell him I loved him and would die to deliver him if it were possible." "Child," said Melpomene with shining eyes, "that thought has not come to you alone. There is one, the greatest of your race, who even this very hour is faring on that same quest. How he speeds you shall learn before many moons pass by. Meanwhile be content to know this: it is ordained that one born of woman must deliver Prometheus." "And meanwhile," cried Thalia in her blithe tones, "there is enough said of these high and solemn matters. Is the night to steal away and no new story told? Come, Orpheus, choose a tale, and I, to waste no time, will choose the teller." With that she bound a rose-hued kerchief over her eyes, and thus blindfolded went laughing round the circle of her sisters, until, suddenly throwing her arms about one of them, "Who is this?" she cried. "Polyhymnia?" Then, pulling off the kerchief, "I have guessed well," said she. "Now, Orpheus, have you too made your choice?" "Please you, ladies all," said the boy, "I have heard what happened in the age of gold and the age of silver, and it seems there was a third age, when the men of clay began to live on earth after the great snowstorm of Cronus. I would hear now the name of the third age, and whether it also passed away or still endures." "It was called the Age of Bronze," answered the fair-haired Polyhymnia, "and I will tell you the reason, and how it likewise came to an end." And she did so in these words. In process of time, 12 fair daughters were born to Pandora and Prometheus, and when they were maidens grown, they were given in marriage to the 12 tallest and goodliest of the men of clay. Now the time came for Pandora to die, for she had fulfilled the span of years that the fates allotted to her. But all the immortals who had helped to adorn her for her bridal entreated Zeus that so much beauty should not be hidden in the grave. And he gave consent that Hermes should carry her alive to the Happy Isles, and permitted Epimetheus to dwell with her there. So those two passed away from the land of Arcadia to the realm of Cronos, and were the first of those highly favored of the gods who have entered the Elysian fields when their earthly life was done. After this, men began to be skillful in the use of fire, and by its aid they soon had tools and weapons of a better sort, for instead of chipping flints into arrowheads and axes, they found out the art of working copper and tin together in the furnace, and so made bronze. And of bronze they fashioned swords and shields, spearheads, hammers, pincers, knives, chisels, and whatever else they needed, whether for war or hunting or handicraft, because they did not know as yet the use of iron. In their pride at this new art, they called themselves the Bronze Folk, and so the age they lived in received also the name of bronze. Meanwhile, the changes that begun in the world when the Golden Age had passed went on apace. The 4 seasons were already such as now we see, and the years of mortal life were already but 70. But many never reached that fullness of age, and those who did were for the most part feeble in body and mind, without joy in their days. For all manner of plagues and infirmities multiplied among men from the hour Pandora opened her casket. Nevertheless, they were not long without remedy against these ills, which indeed would else have destroyed them utterly. Earth herself took pity on them, because she is the mother of all, and because the son she loved the best had formed them out of her own clay. And she brought forth healing herbs for their sake, and began to speak to them out of her hollow caves in their dreams by night, teaching them the use and virtue of each. Some of the dreamers were sore affrighted by the invisible voice, but others hearkened diligently and did according to its bidding, and so arose the first physicians, doers of good to their fellow men. But as these physicians increased in knowledge and came to learn the subtle powers of baneful herbs also, some of them turned their art to evil uses, dealing in poisons and in deadly charms against their private foes, or against any whom they were bribed to harm. And so arose the first wizards and warlocks, men held in great fear by all, who spent their lives in prying into earth's secrets for love of power and greed of gain, and were wise above what is lawful to mortals. Now the bronze folk soon fell into greater wickedness than any that was done by the men of the Silver Age. For these slew in open fight when blind rage came upon them, but the bronze folk would slay in secret by dagger or poisoned cup, and sometimes they hired others to do murder, and all through black envy and coveting their neighbors' goods. At first the whole land had been free to all. All found food and shelter where they could, and none had any possessions worth the stealing, only such poor gear as each man could easily make for himself. But now he that found gold, silver, copper, or tin in the earth fenced the spot about and kept jealous guard there until he had dug up the precious metal. Such a man was soon richer than his fellows by bartering his treasure trove for things of use and ornament, and woe betide him if he were not also stronger of hand and sharper of wit than they. If he were neither, it was his best shift to betake himself to some mighty man of valor, who would keep his wealth from plunderers for a tithe of the same, and this was the recourse of many. And thus there arose the first king, being a most redoubted warrior, to whom so many of the richer sort paid tribute for protection that he had wherewithal to arm and maintain a band of fighting men, and he lorded it over all Arcadia. He was of great strength and stature, fierce and savage as a mountain wolf, and his name was Lycaon. In thirsting after gain, so that there was no manner of wickedness he would not do for the sake of it, Lycaon was neither better nor worse than the rest of the bronze folk, but in one thing he was more like to a wild beast than to a human creature, for he was an eater of men. Did any stranger come to the mountain fastness where he dwelt, the king would entertain him for 7 days with the best of meat and drink, ever pressing him to take his fill of good cheer, and after that had him slain and roasted and banqueted on his flesh. In those days the immortals walked freely upon earth, and having seen the abominable things of the bronze folk, some of the gods brought report of them to Zeus. Hermes, who then and always loved to haunt Arcadia, on whose mountains he was born and reared, made special outcry against the folk who defiled that fair land with their iniquities, and besought Zeus to take vengeance on them. Then Zeus said he would make trial of their ways for himself, and he journeyed through Arcadia with Hermes in the guise of humble travelers, seeking hospitality. Everywhere they were roughly received and bidden pay in goods or gold before they tasted bite or sup. No man, rich or poor, would give them so much as a cup of water for kindness' sake. But at nightfall they came to a mountain where the king's house was, and he made them heartily welcome after his custom, and feasted them plenteously. Now there sat at his table one of the wisest of warlocks, and while they were all making merry, the warlock whispered in the king's ear, "Do these guests no violence, for I perceive that they are gods in the likeness of men." But Lycaon deemed that the warlock sought to beguile him and save these 2 men from being killed and eaten, having perhaps received a bribe from them. "I will soon see," he muttered, smiling evilly, "if you say truly. If these are gods, they will know what manner of meat comes next upon the board before they taste thereof." With that he spoke in undertones to a slave, who presently set a smoking dish before the guests, of which Lycaon bade them eat, saying it was flesh of wild boar. Up started Zeus and Hermes at the sight of it, overturning the table with its ghastly burden. Their mortal guise fell from them in the twinkling of an eye, and the king of gods stood revealed in all his terrible majesty before his cannibal host. "Impious wretch," he said, in tones that shook the ground, "quit the human form you have too long disgraced, and wear henceforth that of the beast to whom your vile soul is nearest akin. Be that your just doom, who have dared to pollute heavenly eyes with this sight abhorred." The long-drawn howl of a wolf broke from Lycaon as he turned to flee that dread presence. The near forest received him, already changed into its gloomy shades, and there, a 4-foot shaggy thing, he led the tribe of his new fellows, creatures less bloodthirsty and cruel than he had been of old. It is said in Arcadia that Zeus consumed the house of Lycaon with flaming thunderbolts, and that a yew tree grove sprang up where the accursed food was eaten, which if any man dare enter, he is straightway turned into a wolf, but recovers his own shape in the 9th year. Now Zeus had assuredly destroyed by fire not only the palace of the man-eater, but the whole land and all the dwellers therein, had not Hermes and others of the immortals entreated him to spare their pleasant haunts. Then said he, "For your sakes I will not burn fair Arcadia, but I will send a great rain upon the earth, and all the folk of bronze shall perish by flood because of their iniquities. None shall escape, for they are all become abominable. I sought until I was weary, and found not one righteous man among them. King of us all, said Hermes, it may be that there is yet one righteous man left, although we found him not. Bethink you how some of those evildoers, when they turned us from their doors, cried mockingly, Get you gone to Deucalion, the fool that takes delight in giving. Should not this Deucalion be some good man who would have made us welcome? That you may put to the proof, answered Zeus. Seek him out in your former guise, and bring me word how you fare. Forth went Hermes on his errand, and sure enough Deucalion received the stranger with all kindness, doing him honor with the best cheer he had. And when Hermes spoke of a recompense, Deucalion desired him to be silent. Poor I am, as you may see, said he, but to what I have you are freely welcome, for I fear high Zeus, and he, they say, sends the guest. That is a true word, said Hermes, laughing, and so went his way. Now Deucalion was in truth a righteous man, and one moreover of generous and hospitable soul, who was content with little wealth, and ever ready to bestow it on such as were poorer than he. Which things his neighbors accounted folly, and they derided him continually, yet let him alone, because he owned not to move their envy. His wife's name was Pyrrha, and she was the eldest of the daughters of Pandora. These two had no children, and were by now well stricken in years. Zeus heard with favor the report of Hermes concerning them, and being resolved to spare their lives, he bade the messenger god return to Deucalion in his true likeness, and warn him of the destruction coming on that wicked generation. Then, by the counsel and devising of Hermes, Deucalion went up into a mountain, and cut him oaken timbers, and builded there an ark. And he prayed the god to let him go, and warn the folk of bronze likewise, if peradventure they might repent and implore pardon of Zeus. Do as you list, said Hermes, but for all the heed they will take, you had as well plead with stones. Even so it was. The wicked folk did but mock at Deucalion's tidings, and when they heard of his building an ark to float upon the waters, they mocked the more, crying that he was crazed in his wits. Go to, fools, said they, a truce with your raving. Have we not seen our valleys a score of times flooded, when the streams are swollen with the autumn rains? Did ever the waters rise up the hillsides, where stand our houses and sheepfolds? No, nor ever will. So let Zeus rain his worst. And as for your ark, our children's children will see it still lying high and dry, and laugh at the tale of the madman who built it. So Deucalion left them to their doom, and went sorrowing to his house. And because Hermes had bidden him make no delay, he took Pyrrha his wife, and all the victual and household stuff that they two could carry, and brought them to the ark on the mountain. In his poor homestead there was neither bondman nor bondwoman, ox nor ass, for him to save alive, only a hound that went with him a-hunting, and a great cat that went hunting by himself. The hound now followed Deucalion as he was wont, and the cat, with tail erect, trotted gravely at Pyrrha's heels, as though aware of what was coming. The sky all that day had been heavily overcast with leaden clouds. Towards evening the low sun looked forth with a wan, sickly glare, soon blotted out by curtains of rolling vapor. Night fell sudden and oppressive over land and sea, as it were the dropping of an ink-black, stifling pall. Faint lightnings played athwart the lower edges of that vast canopy, and thunder began to mutter in the hot, pulseless air. Deucalion and his companions were crouching together beside the ark, waiting in fear and trembling for that which should betide. But the bronze folk sat in their houses, eating and drinking and making merry, and said to one another, There is sure a great tempest toward, but what is that to us who are safely housed? And when the rain began to fall, they thought of Deucalion, and said, Tomorrow, when the rain has ceased, we shall see him come drenched and dripping from his leaking ark, and beg a seat at our warm hearths. But the rain did not cease on the morrow, nor the day after, for Zeus had broken up the fountains of the firmament, and their waters poured forth from the threshold of heaven like cataracts leaping from the cliff. 40 days and 40 nights it rained in one vast torrent. The while it seemed as though there were no longer day or night, earth or sky, only a gray world of swirling water. A world filled at first with wild voices of the rivers as they rose and roared along the valleys, but ere long a world of deathly stillness. For lakes and streams rose higher and yet higher until all were met and mingled in one boundless flood, whose swift, silent tide engulfed the hills to their very summits. As the flood swept upward, the bronze folk fled before it towards the hilltops, and some of them it overtook sooner, some later, but late or soon they all perished in the waters. No living creature escaped out of all Arcadia, save in Deucalion's ark, except the birds of the air, and none was left alive there except the wild beasts, who, being weatherwise, took refuge betimes on certain loftiest peaks that stood as islands in the watery waste. Meanwhile, by the providence of Zeus, the frail ark rode safe among heaving billows, and when the 40 days were past, it rested on a peak of the mountain called Parnassus, that is, in the country of Boeotia. Then Zeus closed up again the fountains of heaven, and by a mighty wind he drove back the waters from the face of the earth into limitless ocean, and the dry land appeared. Such was the end of the wicked race who had made so ill a use of that great gift Prometheus brought them. When Deucalion and Pyrrha looked forth from the ark and saw the waters abating on every side and solid ground all about it, they came out praising Zeus. And behold, they were on a high mountain that they had never seen, and a strange country lay outspread below them. For a little while they made shift to live on that mountain, with the dog and the cat for companions, and Deucalion was content, busying himself in 100 ways, as a man may do who is shipwrecked on some desert isle. But Pyrrha wearied for the sight of human faces, and of the blue smoke rising at morn and eve from kindly hearths of men, and she wept to think she must no more hear the voices of children, nor the young lasses merry at the milking, because she and her husband were left alone, the last of all their race. One day, sad at heart, she wandered far down the mountain into a rocky glen, where was a darksome cave. And as she passed by the mouth of the cave, a voice from within it called to her by name. Pyrrha knew that one of the immortals spoke to her, and she answered, trembling, "Here am I." Then said the voice, "Weep no more, daughter of Pandora. Your sorrow is known and pitied of one who has power to turn it into joy. Would you raise up children to your husband from the ground who shall become a mighty folk and replenish the earth? Then return to him quickly and say, we are bidden to cast behind us the bones of our great mother." So Pyrrha returned to Deucalion with what speed she could, being no longer young or light of foot, and told him the words she had heard. But when they considered the message, they were troubled, doubting what it might mean. For only the gods knew what became of Pandora, whom Hermes carried secretly to the Happy Isles. And Pyrrha said, "We know not the place of my mother's sepulchre, but even if we found it, how could we dare such an impious deed as to disturb her bones?" "Nay, wife," said Deucalion, "none of the blessed gods would bid us do so wickedly. Let me think a while." And presently, "I have it," he cried. "It is Earth who is our great mother. Were we not formed of her substance? And the bones of Earth are the rocks and stones." Then they hasted to gather up stones in the folds of their garments, and cast them backwards over their shoulders. And behold, the stones no sooner touched the ground than those Deucalion threw turned into men, and those his wife threw into women. Thus was a new race of mortals given breath and being, of whom the men that now live are the offspring. And with the great flood the world entered upon its fourth age, which endures unto this day. The folk of this age are not all of one nature, but some are just and pious, as were the golden race, some unjust and godless, like the races of silver and of bronze. So the world now is full of mingled good and evil, like a fruitful field where wheat and tares grow together. But those whose eyes are opened to behold the future know that another and worse age is yet to come, which shall be called the age of iron. Then the whole earth shall be full of tyranny and cruel bondage, so that the gods forsake it utterly. Then shall the bitter cry of the oppressed rise day and night to the gates of heaven. In that far distant time men shall look back with longing to this our day. So fair and free will its life appear to them, and they will call it the age of the heroes, because of the great deeds done therein, which shall be sung and told from one generation to another. But when fate's wheel has come full circle, the Iron Age shall likewise have an end, for the world shall be cleansed by fire, as once by flood, and from its ashes there shall arise a new heaven and a new earth. End of Deucalion's Flood. Read by Mark Harrington, Framingham, Massachusetts.